Oh my god, NodKrai is finally out, and honestly, this feels like a complete step up from everything Genshin Impact has ever done. NodKrai has set a new bar for what gacha games should be, and I can say with 100% confidence that I recommend this region to anybody.
Traveler, welcome to NodKrai.
I really wish that one day when I'm talking about Genshin Impact, I can start with that same level of energy. I pray for that day. But to be honest, while NodKrai absolutely did not elicit that kind of reaction from me, I was pleasantly surprised by what I got. Granted, the bar was in hell and Genshin met just about all the worst expectations I had for it, but there were still some genuinely cool things. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So if you enjoy the kind of content, make sure to like the video and tell me what you think about NodKrai. Have you played NodKrai yet? Do you think it is worth your time? What stands out to you? I want to know your thoughts in the comments. And of course, subscribe in case you will on any of my future videos. Before we get into it, this video is sponsored by Top Up Life. Top Up Life is your go-to for resources in your favorite gacha game. Whether it's characters, weapons, currency, whatever you need, Top Up Life has it and always at a discount. And right now, Augusta, yes, the F4 of Septimus herself, is finally here. And if you want to pull for her at a discount, or maybe you're saving up for Yuno, who drops right after Augusta, I highly recommend checking them out. And here's the best part. If you use my code TIVE, that is TIVE, you get an extra 12% off on top of their already discounted product. So spend wisely, don't overspend, and get what you need with Top of Life. Huge thanks to them for sponsoring this video, and now let's get into it. So in our breakdown of NodKrai, we're going to answer 3 very important questions in this video. The first is, how much of an improvement is NodKrai compared to other Genshin regions? And when I say other regions, let's be real, I'm only talking about Natlan, because I'll be the first to tell you that Fontaine is still the best region in Genshin Impact's bar none. This is not even up for debate. The second question, how much do the fundamental flaws of Genshin Impact affect this story? I mean, we already know that Genshin Impact's fundamental flaws are baked into the story, and that is not changing. But are they so bad that they make the game unplayable, or are they manageable enough, like in Fontaine, where you can still enjoy the story unfold despite the issues? And the third question, if you haven't played NodKrai yet, should you? Should you explore this region, experience the story, and actually invest your time into it? That's what we're going to break down in this video. So let's start with the first question. Is NodKrai better than Natlan? The short answer, no. And there are a couple of reasons why. Not all of them are obvious, but let's start with the most straightforward. NodKrai proves that your investment in Natlan doesn't really mean much, because the moment we step into this new region, we already knew that our Natlan characters won't function as optimally. And sure enough, going into NodKrai with Natlan characters feel underwhelming. Suddenly, a huge chunk of your investment in those characters doesn't feel nearly as satisfying as it should. And here's the kicker. Not only are these characters less optimal outside Natlan, but they're also missing out on the regional benefits that NodKrai characters get, and that's a double whammy. You're essentially stuck spending most of your year in a brand new region without your favorite characters feeling like themselves anymore. Then comes the realization that if you want to experience NodKrai at its fullest, you're basically forced to summon a NodKrai character, and the difference in gameplay is massive. I mean, the first ever playable character in NodKrai, Llama, already power creeps the Genjo Archon herself, and that should say everything about what is going on in this region. Now, none of this is surprising. This is all what we expected, so let's move on to the less obvious reasons. I've asked this question before in a previous video, and I'll ask again now that we're finally in NodKrai. What do we actually get in this region that we didn't already have somewhere else? Now that many of us have played through NodKrai, what is here that we haven't already seen in Mondstadt, Lihir, in Azuma, or beyond? Is it new short distance reversal mechanics, a new environment, or new enemies? What exactly are we getting in NodKrai? Where is the hype factor? Because the only truly memorable thing I can think of is NodKrai is the story. So let's talk about that. Now, the last time we broke down a Genshin Impact story, we identified 3 fundamental problems that show up again and again. First is the on-paper problem. This is where ideas sound good in theory, but completely fall apart in execution. On paper, Genshin's concepts often look strong, sometimes even brilliant, but when it comes to actually delivering them in-game, the execution just doesn't hold up. The second is the tell don't show problem, and this one is pretty self-explanatory. Instead of showing us key events, Genshin often just talks about them. Big moments get summarized instead of experienced, which undercuts the emotional weight of the story. And the third is the constant yap problem. Whether it's padding out the runtime or filling silence, Genshin has this habit of stuffing unnecessary dialogue into critical story beats, and all that extra chatter often kills the pacing of moments that should hit hard. So the question is, how does NodKrai's story handle these issues? Starting with the on-paper problem, I'd actually say that Genshin did a pretty good job here, at least by Genshin's own standards. Now, don't get me wrong, the fundamental problems are still there. The pacing issues are alive and well. You still hit moments where the story grinds to a halt, like stopping right at an important plot point just to spend an hour and a half serving drinks to NPCs. And there are plenty of moments like this scattered throughout the game. But when it comes to taking the core ideas, the things that look solid on paper, and actually executing them, I say NodKrai's story delivers better than usual. You see, the NodKrai arc really centers around 2 main plot points. First, first, the traveler's quest to uncover what actually happened with his spaceship, what happens to his siblings, and the larger fallout of that event. And the second, the regional central conflict, the NodKrai struggle with the Wild Hunt, the Abyss, and everything tied to that threat. And I'll say this, they did a pretty good job not only telling these individual stories, but also integrating the traveler's personal quest about the spaceship into the NodKrai arc in a way that didn't feel forced. It actually came across smoother than I would have imagined. And honestly, even when it came to the traveler's story itself, everything surrounding him and the spaceship, that part genuinely woke up the lore nerd in me. I found myself actually intrigued. The whole storyline gave me something I haven't felt in Genshin for a very long time, ever since Fontaine honestly, and that is actual curiosity, the genuine desire to know more, the feeling of being invested in the story again, and I really appreciated that. Now the NodKrai story itself is a little different, because what Genshin chose to do as the end game here was to integrate the 5 sinners directly into the main arc, and by Genshin standards this wasn't handled badly. In fact, I see they did a pretty decent job of presenting the ideas and following through on them. The problem is, for me, what we got in the 6.0 storyline just wasn't interesting. You could see the game trying to bring together bits and pieces of lore that they thought the fans wanted. The False Sky, the Moon Sisters, Columbina maybe being tied into the whole thread. But it all felt like too little too late. Because even if I cared about the Moon Sisters and all these other lores attached to it, dropping that lore in here didn't suddenly make the story engaging. They even tried to create these surreal endgame moments where the traveler meets and journeys with their sibling, and sure, on paper that should have been powerful, but in practice, it felt awkward. Hearing two mostly silenced characters suddenly talk so much didn't just land. Whether it was the voice acting or just the fact that we're so used to them being quiet, the dialogue came across as unnatural, and because of that, the emotional impact completely missed me. Even the sinner they chose to spotlight wasn't compelling, because out of all the 5 sinners, only 2 are well known and consistently talked about to the community, mostly Daughter and partially Sartology. Yet the one we got, Rere, wasn't either of them. Add that to the fact that the character was generic and one-dimensional, and you're left with a story beat that was more boring than anything else. So with this arc, execution wasn't the issue. The real issue was the ideas themselves. They weren't just interesting, and every attempt the game made to dress them up ended up falling flat. Now moving on to the tell don't show problem, honestly I see Genshin also did a really solid job here. For the most part, they showed us everything that happened throughout the story instead of just dumping it through narration. There were very few moments that relied on text or off-screen explanations, and regardless of how uninteresting I think the story itself was, I really appreciate that Genshin leaned into visual storytelling. There were so many times where I fully expected the infamous black screen white text, but to my surprise that barely showed up at all, and I've got to give them credit for that. In fact, near the end of the story there was a section I genuinely enjoyed from a visual standpoint. You take control of Lauma and a NodKrai on fire in a city in chaos, and as Lauma your attacks were uniting the people. Now yes, I have a lot of issues with how that section was written from a narrative perspective, but as a piece of visual storytelling it worked. Because I didn't just control Lauma, I felt the impact of what was happening, the panic in the NPCs, the hope when Lauma made a speech. It is not just in there, but throughout most of the story, they actually did well in showing us what mattered instead of hiding it behind walls of text. But when it comes to the constant yap problem in the story, that is a completely different issue. And honestly, I think this along with pacing might be the biggest reason the story felt so uninteresting to me. Because as I said earlier, there were moments where the plot was building towards something crazy, something genuinely exciting, and then it just stopped. It stopped so we could sit through irrelevant dialogue, fill a conversation with Paimon, or endless chats with NPCs. But I think the worst part of the entire story is every moment that involved Yehoda, because honestly, this character feels like Hoyoverse's answer to the question, what if there were 2 Paimons? Now on paper, Yehoda is just another bubbly, go-lucky character, and that is fine. But Hoyoverse gave her one comedic gimmick. And the second you see it, you know it's going to become unbearable. You see, whenever Yehoda panics and wants to think, she goes into her own little world. Literally, she has like an out-of-body experience and talks to herself through what is going on. Now, on its own, that is fine. You might shrug it off the first time, but here's the problem. The game keeps doing this over and over. Regardless of the scene, regardless of the tone, it doesn't matter if the story is at a serious turning point, or if emotions are high, Yehoda will still pull out the same tired gimmick. And by that point, it stops being harmless, it stops being quirky, it just becomes flat out annoying. So to everyone who quit Genshin Impact or just drifted away from it, is NodKrai worth your time? Well, here's the truth. NodKrai is just more Genshin Impact. There is absolutely nothing here that separates it from what you've already played. Whether it's story, exploration, gameplay, it is all the same formula. All the positives I mentioned, we've seen them all before, and honestly, we saw them better in Fontaine. So should you come back to NodKrai? Well, if you still enjoy Genshin Impact, then sure, you'll probably enjoy this too. But if you don't, then stay away. NodKrai will not give you anything new or unexpected. But that is just me. What do you think? Did you find NodKrai fun? Did it do anything for you? Or does it just feel like more of the same? Let me know down in the comments, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.